this video, I'm going to show you guys how to build an awesome budget gaming PC build for under $750. A build that's going to provide great performance at 1080p in all of the latest titles. And we're not just talking about the easy to run shooters like Apex and Fortnite, but AAA games like Alan Wake 2, Black Myth Wukong, and the new Star Wars 2. I'll be walking you guys through all the parts that I selected and why, showing you how to put this build together, and looking at performance in detail a little later on. Let's do this. Now, if you want to pick up any of the parts of this build, I'll link them individually down below. And if you're based here in the UK, you can actually pick up a system very similar to this for around £750 if you'd rather go the pre-built route, but more on that later. Now, with this being a budget build, there are obviously some compromises we have to make in order to get it A, in the price point, and B, leave as much money for those performance parts as possible. The first signs of this compromise are with the CPU and motherboard. Now, this is AMD's sort of last generation, or generation before at this point, Ryzen 5000 lineup. And for budget gaming, I think it makes a lot of sense. This motherboard from ASRock, their B550M Pro 4, can commonly be found for as little as £100 or dollars, while the CPU is a similar story, AMD's Ryzen 5 5600 Non-X. You still get 6 cores, 12 threads, and more than enough performance for what we need here today, especially at 1080p. Now, the idea behind all these parts is to leave as much money for the GPU as possible. And with this build coming in at closer to $700 than to $750, there aren't that many options to choose from. Now, I've gone for the RTX 4060. And while Nvidia have helped make this video possible and are promoting the pre-built at overclock as I mentioned earlier, I do believe the 4060 to be the right card for this budget, and hear me out as to why. Now, I've been fairly clear on the channel about what I like about this card and what I don't. And yes, when it first launched, I went on a bit of a rant about the whole kind of VRAM situation. Now, this card comes with 8GB, which is the same as what you'll get on AMD's directly competing RX 7600, and is a perfectly sufficient amount for 1080p. Take a look at these gaming benchmarks in 1080p high, I'll be delving into these more later, and look out for the VRAM usage at the top of your screen. Here, this card is not satisfying the full 8GB in the vast majority of games. Now, the other feasible option to pick from is actually also from Nvidia, and that would be their last gen 3060. And I see lots of people make this mistake where they go for the 3060 over the 4060 because of VRAM alone. That's silly based on the fact the 4060 actually has far more performance than the 3060, and you can see that in some of our performance graphs on your screen now. To put it plain and simply, for a budget 1080p PC build, this is the best option right now. And you can see more about why I feel like that in our recent best GPUs video, where I also recommended the 4060 as the best card for under $300. This one's from GeekaWhat, by the way, but the model you go for is going to vary depending on what's the best price on the market right now. Moving through some of the other parts worth a mention, memory, I've gone for this nice little kit from Team Group. This is their T-Force Delta. Now, to stay within the confines of the budget for this build, you're going to want to go for 16 gigs. Again, I would rather have 32GB in a build, well, any build really. However, I do think 16GB is the amount we're going to need to go for in a system like this. And again, if you look at some of the testing we've done before putting this system together, most titles, 16 gigs is actually perfectly sufficient. At this price point, it's all about making the right compromises. An area though where I feel like I haven't really compromised is the storage. This is Crucial's P3 Plus. Managed to squeeze in a 1TB drive at this budget, and it's my favourite entry-level Gen 4 NVMe. Arguably slightly overkill for this system, but fast speed on the drive is going to help the overall snappiness of the system, and that to me is always a good thing. Power in this build is going to be provided by the MSI MAG A650BN. This is an 80 plus bronze certified unit. It's not modular, it's no frills, but it has everything we need, and more than enough power for the 4060, which is incredibly power efficient. Finally, last part to talk about is the case. This is the Fractal Design Pop Air. You can get the Pop Air Mini, which is a bit smaller and might suit better the M80X board in this build. It's a really nice case at a really good price point. So if you're going to do the DIY approach for this build, I can highly recommend it. The case overclockers are using in their pre-built solution is a little bit different, but a similar story. Mesh, fans, glass. What more could you want for the $750 price point? So let's make a start and get this thing built. And as always, begin by opening up the motherboard. This is the ASRock B550M Pro 4. before. Now, ASRock are consistently just a really solid option when it comes to building entry-level gaming PCs. And as you can see from the plastic brackets, which I've used before, this is a no-frills motherboard that just ticks a lot of boxes. It's got USB-C, it's got your fast USB Type-A, room for your M.2 slots, and of course the AM4 Plus socket we need for the Ryzen 5 5500. 4 RAM DIMM slots is great because it means we can use dual channel memory. Some cheap boards only have 2, which is bad because then you can't have the extra bandwidth of 2 DIMMs. Even though I've only got 16 gigs of RAM in this build, because there are 2 slots spare, you could step up to 32 gigs later. So still a bit of upgradability at what is undoubtedly a more entry-level system. CPU installation is pretty easy. Just pull up this retention arm, drop the CPU into place. Be really careful because there are, of course, pins on the processor. Get it all lined up nice and carefully, make sure the triangles match up, and then return the arm down nice and easy. Going to pull back the 2nd and 4th slots on the RAM DIMMs. These are quite clever as well. These are the fancy ones, so you only have to do it on one side. Then slide the RAM into place. Bit of pressure, and it will click in. So really nice and simple. And this is RGB as well. So that's going to look amazing. Can get the slightly cheaper Wukong kit as well if you want to save a bit of cash. The NVMe drive is going to round things off. Make sure you use a smaller screwdriver for this and just unscrew each side of the NVMe heatsink. Or as ASRock call it, the M.2 armor. Slide the drive in at sort of a 45-degree angle. Push it down. Make sure you remove the plastic on the M.2 thermal pad. I get in a lot of trouble for this because I forget to do it all the time. And then pop the cover back into place. Couple of screws on each side to secure the drive and the cover down, and we are good to go. I'm going to be using the stock cooler for this build as it comes included with the processor and is free. It will come with pre-applied thermal paste if it's new. This one has been used before, so I'm going to drop a dab of my own thermal paste on to make sure the thermal bond between the processor and cooler is nice and strong. Screw it in corner by corner, do a few laps around the cooler to make sure it's all evenly tight, and that's it as far as the motherboard assembly goes. One of the only downsides of this board though is it uses an old school rear I/O shield. That means I'm going to have to clip that in to the case. Now, side panel is going to easily pop off before I then go ahead and clip the I/O into the back. Now the audio port's going to be at the bottom, the text on the outside, padding on the inside, click, 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 click. Yes, lovely stuff. Also going to remove the rear side panel at this stage, as that's going to make the next bit of the build a little bit easier. Now, when it comes to installing motherboards into cases, especially when the motherboard is a little smaller than the case is perhaps made for in terms of it supports up to ATX, this is micro ATX, you will want to check standoff location. So check on the motherboard now where all the holes are. We'll circle them to make it a bit easier. And then I need to match this up with the standoff hole locations in the case itself. So there's 3 at the top, 3 along the middle, and 3 down the bottom. They've got to move, so there'll be 3 at the top, 3 down the middle, and a further 2 in slightly lower locations. Next step in the build is the power supply. This is obviously the 650 watt MSI unit I was talking about earlier. It makes a lot of sense really for this build. 650 watts is more than adequate. Again, it's not modular, but at this level, we've not really got that many cables to deal with anyway. Let me walk you guys through vaguely the cables that are involved. So we've got motherboard cables, that's the large 24-pin doodad. We've also got some SATA and some Molex cables. These are a bit of a mess, I'll be honest. Then we've got a CPU power cable, so it's just one 4+4 pin, alongside a pair of 6+2 pin PCI power cables. I think the 4060, I don't think that's Gen 5. I think that is just, yeah, that's just a standard 8-pin connector, a single 8-pin. So no need for an ATX3 or Gen 5 compatible unit in this build. I'm going to go ahead and screw this into the back of the case and then wire up the CPU to the top left, motherboard to the right-hand side, and make a start on the front panel cables from HD audio through to JFP1 front panel, USB 3 Type A, and there's no Type C on this case. That's an optional upgrade which you can buy from Fractal for a bit more money. Again, all part of that sort of considered cost saving. That then leaves me with one more component to go, and that is, of course, just the graphics card. And you forget how tiny these things are, so small. What I'm going to do is make sure the PCI clip on the motherboard is pushed down, slide the graphics card in. My rear PCI lanes have already been removed from a previous build, so that makes life easy. Click that in, nice and easy. Also going to wire up the GPU power at this stage, just the single 8-pin. So I'm going to go ahead and snip this off. There we go. Before wiring the GPU up. Cable tie to hold that in place in a moment will be good. And of course, 2 screws to stop the GPU from going anywhere too. And there we have it, a pretty much complete gaming PC build. But how does it perform? That is, of course, the important question you're probably all asking. Looking good then, but what about performance? That's the bit that really matters. Well, let's start off, shall we, with Black Myth Wukong, a very hard title to run. Now, at 1080p high settings, without any frame gen or DLSS enabled, the build did pretty well, 52 FPS. But turning frame generation on and setting DLSS to the quality preset, that's going to give a bump in frame rate without really hurting the visual fidelity, and the frame rate skyrocketed up to 99 frames per second on average. It was a similar story in Cyberpunk 2077, running at vanilla settings at 1080p high, achieved 75 frames on average, not too bad, but enabled DLSS and frame generation, and the frame rate rose nicely to 88 frames per second on average. Star Wars Outlaws is another game that can be tricky to run, and at 1080p high, the build only really pulled in about 59 frames per second. Playable and around the key 60 FPS mark, but what about turning DLSS with frame gen on? Well, in this instance, it pushed the frame rates to well over 100 FPS, with 115 all told. You can check out the side-by-sides with DLSS on versus off, and the only real noticeable difference is the extra frame rate. Fortnite at 1080p competitive doesn't use any DLSS technology, so straight rasterization, still did well though, well over 100 frames with 125 FPS on average. Apex Legends at 1080p high is actually better than Fortnite from a performance point of view, which is a little surprising, where the build pulled in around 186 FPS on average. Finally, I also tested out Alan Wake 2, a personal favourite of mine. Here at 1080p high settings, we did manage to achieve just shy of the magical 60 number with 59.7 FPS on average. I think that probably just about qualifies for 60 frames per second. Now, of course, I'd prefer to be at 80 or 100, but on a build like this that's just so affordable at that key $750, $800 price tag, I really can't complain. Now, if you turn DLSS on and set it to the quality preset with frame gen in Alan Wake 2, you're going to see frame rates catapult right up to well into the triple digit mark with 112 frames per second on average, while turning ray tracing on drops this down to 70 frames per second, but massively increases the visual experience you're going to receive. So 3 different configurations in Alan Wake 2, from rasterization to DLSS and frame gen to DLSS, frame gen, and ray tracing. What do you guys think of this system? Let me know in the comments below. You can find individual components in the description or buy this system pre-built from overclockers here in the UK for around £750. Latest pricing and availability will be in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to get subscribed. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.